Hello and welcome to the lecture. So in the last lecture we saw about the calling the modal dialog through a dynamic way where the inputs would be varying, and we are using the URL concept where we'll be passing the through AJAX request and invoking that in JavaScript and opening the model. So now there are some things which we need to consider for the security of the page. Basically, a modal dialog is designed in such a way that it's accessible only to a certain user who has logged in. In case of some other user who is logging in, if he tries to open the modal dialog, that should show some some restriction message that can be, because user can't, and also it's something that not open for everyone. That's the purpose of the modal dialog. It should be having an access control or something that's not always open to everyone. So in that case we need to secure it, and we need to add some security things as well. So we need to be take this in mind to development, and that's the thing what I was telling going to be in this lecture. So let's create this, let's go to this page where we have this this thing to be read only, so that for that user it would be read only in that case, I'm assuming. So for the user who is having this store ID as the select list, let's make this as read only always, so that the user can't try to change and open that modal dialog. Let us make this read only. Okay, it seems to be set to if it's read only, it won't be taking the list of values as the input. So we'll add one source here with the cdl being having the 3 as the ID. So I'm using that one, and it's saved, and let's refresh and we'll see the value with cdl, and we are not able to edit because this is read only now. So if I open the modal dialog, I'm able to see this, and using the the URL, user can get it through the maybe through the network side. Suppose the user is only restricted to open the modal dialog for this particular the particular city, maybe this is Seattle city, only for that logged in city the user can see. He can't change and see. But there are cases we can try to use some hacker can use this network and get the checksum and every values here through this. So I will tell you how. So when user is trying to get the information how the dialog is open, there is a thing here. So I have cleared it, so it's completely empty. When you open the modal dialog, the first line you can notice it, that will have the AJAX what we have shown, and the next one. So this makes the AJAX request for our server, and this line would be seen as a complete information of that model checksum. So if I double click it, it's opening, and you can see that this is a modal dialog, and it's having that HTML thing. Everything is open with this thing, so you can understand. So it's a modal dialog mentioned here. And as you remember in the previous lecture, we saw about the checksum here that is generated with this dialog CS, that dialog checksum. This is a checksum that is generated here, and we are not securing this store ID. That is the main thing. So the main goal of this lecture is to, whatever the parameters that you're passing through the apex tool or prepare URL, you have to secure that. By default it is not secured, that's the thing. So what happens is, now the user is having a restriction to open this particular store, that's the cdl, and user can try to change it. Suppose if I try to change it to 2, I suppose, so I'm able to get the San Francisco. So this is not what we wanted in the application design. It can really create a lot of security aspects, like a breach to this data, and it's like data you're not supposed to see this data. That's the thing. So we need to secure this. So for that we have a concept there with respect to security that we should do in the modal dialog. So we have to make it to restricted or even the checksum thing where we have been seeing the restriction. So let's go to the modal dialog page and going to the store ID. Here under this security we have this session state protection. So by default, if you're creating any page item, it would be unrestricted. So what it should be done is it should be having restricted mode, but we are not restricting because this is a dynamically varying one. So this is not a fixed value, it is varying value because it will be used for other users who can change the values of the store, right? So for this user we can make it restricted, but we have to consider the other user as well. So in that case we have to use the checksum only, because this is if you're using this as this page item as a modal dialog input for the prepare URL function, then you should use checksum required for sure. I am telling, we are not supposed to use the restricted, which I told you earlier, because this is with respect to checksum thing that's passed over the prepare URL that will be generating. So when we are including this page item with the session level protection, so there are 4 things, which is the checksum required. We have 3: application, user, and the session. So I would recommend you to use the session level with respect to what we saw, and restricted for the modal dialog is not recommended. So we'll go with the session level checksum required. What this does is, so whenever the modal dialog is trying to generate this checksum, it is protecting only the page level, it's not protecting this store ID. So now if you try to make this as checksum required for the protection, it will consider this value as well. So with the respect to the default value, which was 3 earlier, it will try to protect that. So if anything was changed, we will get an error. So we'll try to make this as checksum required, and for the input which is passed to the modal dialog when preparing URL, so this is protected. And now let's go back and we'll try to make that request again maybe. So let's try to open, it will be fine because this is with respect to 3, that's why we are able to open. And if it's with respect to other value, it should not. So let us try with that, and I'm opening and this network is empty. And now if you go to the top for the second one, if you open, its store ID is 3, and now if I try to make it a 2, we'll get an error. So now we are getting an error because the checksum is it's showing as some invalid, because we are trying to hack it. We are trying to change the value to the modal dialog, because for the old ID3 it was having the checksum match with this, and for the new ID2 it was not able to get it because this generation of checksum is protected for the ID3. So if user tries to tamper the ID, you won't be able to see it. So that's the main secure aspect of this modal dialog. We need to consider this when we are passing this as the URL. When we are preparing that URL, whatever the values we are passing in the PS SQL, we have to consider this page item as checksum required thing and not restricted, because this is a dynamic varying thing. If it's static, it's fine, but this is a dynamically varying, that's why we are using AJAX. So then we have to use the checksum required, and with the session level I recommend, and it's up to you. And then use that with the option checksum required in that modal dialog, so that the page will be protected. So this is the aspect I want to discuss and in this lecture about the security. So this ends up the modal dialog, and we'll see more the further sections about in the advanced topics in JavaScript in the coming lectures.